Christo Wiese, the 3 lessons learned from Steinhoff in an excerpt from the updated edition of Pieter du Toit's 2019 book, The Stellenbosch Mafia, Inside the Billionaires Club, is now out. And in this edition, du Toit elaborates on a well-documented story of exposés of accounting irregularities and investments gone wrong, causing a huge fallout between Steinhoff and its former chairman, Christo Wiese. The latter had invested his life's earnings at Steinhoff and apparently lost about 59 billion rand. And we now chat to Pieter du Toit, author of The Stellenbosch Mafia, who caught up with Christo Wiese in December last year. Peter, good to speak to you again. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
It seems like a lifetime ago when you and I were first talking about your book, but it's been 2 years, but with COVID, It feels like it's been so much longer.
It does. It does. A lot of things have happened, and our whole worlds have changed. But luckily, people are still reading books, which is a good thing.
Yeah, which is one of the things you may have cultivated a habit of doing, reading during these lockdown periods. But very interested to know, and perhaps just before we get to the editions, let's just quickly recap a bit of a synopsis for those who may still not have read your book in terms of the Stellenbosch Mafia and what it was about.
Well, the book's genesis, as we discussed the previous time as well, was really in the period between 2016 2017, when the state capture project was really at its epoch, at its highest, and where terms like white monopoly capital, radical economic transformation, and the whole Stellenbosch Mafia concept became a very loaded political concept. Julius Malema, Bell Pottinger, Duduzane Zuma, everyone used the so-called Stellenbosch Mafia to try and draw the attention away from the grand state capture project that was then in full swing. And I don't think you get many easier targets than a group of fabulously rich white Afrikaans men in Stellenbosch. And I set out to write the story of the Stellenbosch Mafia, the so-called Stellenbosch Mafia, to go and see whether or not there is indeed this grouping of individuals that, short of controlling the world, controlled South Africa, the currency, the economy, and government. And what I found, and how I explain it in the book, is a group of rich men who made their money building big corporate empires, but along the way, not only growing very rich, but creating thousands upon thousands of job opportunities, paying billions and billions of rand in corporate tax every year, and individuals who consider themselves very much part of this country and who believe in the democratic project, certainly. But that does not take away from the very real structural problems in the economy that we do have. But it was a fascinating story. Of course, someone like Johan Rupert from Remgro plays a very significant role in the book and is a central figure in that grouping from Stellenbosch.
And what was also interesting is how all of these rich men behind the mountain relate to one another. And we'll come to that in a little bit when we talk about Rupert and Wiese. But when we left off our conversation back in 2019, we left things off when Christo Wiese sued Steinhoff in 2018. And what came of that?
So the Steinhoff matter is something that we still have no clarity on. It's been almost 4 years. We do see that there is some movement now. We know that there have been indictments in Germany. The German authorities have taken a long time to try and unravel, not that they have done so, to try and unravel the Steinhoff structure. We know there was an investigation by PricewaterhouseCoopers, who have produced a forensic report. We have not yet seen the full forensic report. It's still being kept under wraps. And then there have been some legal action in this country, like you mentioned, Christo Wiese trying to recoup some of his losses. But we haven't seen any real accountability yet. We have not seen any trials start yet. And I think that's a function of a couple of things. Firstly, the complicated nature of the alleged crimes at Steinhoff. First of all, Steinhoff was a very complicated a company with a complicated structure. It had legal presence, a legal presence in a number of countries, which means there are a number of legal jurisdictions that the company had to operate under, which means that if legal action is being taken against Steinhoff, all the different jurisdictions need to be taken into account, from the Netherlands, France, America, Britain, Germany, South Africa, and other countries. So it was a very convoluted and complicated structure. And then the fact that we have not seen any real action in this country is due to the loss of skills and expertise over many years at both the Directorate of Priority Crimes Investigations at the police, commonly known as the Hawks, and the National Prosecuting Authority. You'll remember that under President Jacob Zuma's government for almost a decade, there was a systematic and very clear attempt to undermine and to hollow out institutions of state, like the National Prosecuting Authority, like the South African Revenue Service, and like the Hawks. So the ability of South African authorities to unpick the mess that was left by Marcus Jooste, to unpick the mess that was created by, as is very euphemistically called, dodgy accounting practices / fraud. It's very difficult for our authorities to figure out what went wrong and what happened. The judges seem to be a step or two ahead of us, but let's hope that we'll see more progress over the next year. Christo Wiese is someone that seems to have taken quite a sanguine approach to what is happening. When I spoke to him for the new edition of the book in December, he was very gracious. And he was every bit the gentleman that many people say he is, saying, look, he's lost a heck of a lot of money, but he's still very much privileged in a privileged position. I think he's part of the 0.001% of people in the world. So, he'll survive. He was explaining quite clearly what lessons he learned. So let's hope that accountability will eventually come to Steinhoff and Marcus Jooste.
But why not? On the one hand, Pieter, you speak about state institutions not being able to do their part. But what about the private sector? We look at Christo Wiese. He lost 59 billion rand, unimaginable sum of money to most of us. We can't even dream about it. He also, he's on record. He said, he has asked, he's questioned the accountability of some of our financial institutions. Where were they? How come nothing has come of this? Probably the biggest company heist that we've seen in terms of the sheer amount of money that was lost here. And some people would say, but, this is private money, forgetting that public money was also invested and lost during the Steinhoff saga. So where was the accountability from that perspective? Because Wiese said he would rather give back, these worthless shares and have his money back. But he was the chairman of Steinhoff at the time. Where was the oversight?
Absolutely. I think the one big lesson that we all learned over the last couple of years is that white-collar crime, corruption in the private sector is every bit as bad as it is in the public sector. As working journalists, as investigative journalists, we cover grand corruption in the public sector every single day. That's our big focus. But corruption in the private sector, like we saw with Steinhoff, is bad, and it affected thousands upon thousands of pension holders, including poor people, including people that work in the state, and probably you and me as well. The oversight that should have happened from those regulatory bodies, like the financial services centers, the organizations that look after the accounting profession, they failed in their jobs, and that's pretty clear. We've seen some form of repercussions in that Jooste has been fined millions of rand. He's been sanctioned by the accounting profession, but is that enough? We don't think so. But the most important thing I think we need to see is people in orange overalls. Whether it is related to state capture or whether it's related to the alleged massive fraud at Steinhoff. People need to go to jail, and we do need to create a society and an environment and a culture where there is accountability for misdeeds. We have not seen it yet, and I think we've seen a massive failure of both the private sector professional regulatory bodies and oversight bodies connected to the government and the state.
So the million-dollar question is, of course, where is Marcus Jooste? And you caught up with Christo Wiese and also with Johan Rupert, and you shared some of the comments that Rupert had made about Wiese's finances. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, look, there's no love lost between the two men. I think when you have two bulls in a kraal, it might be a big kraal, but if it's two big bulls in a kraal, they are bound to bump or rub up against each other in quite unpleasant ways, and that was pretty clear. Speaking to Rupert and Wiese, but it's not a state secret that they aren't fans of each other. And I think the way that Wiese has handled this disaster that hit his business empire. Remember, he built PEP and Pepcore up from scratch. From a very tiny store in Uppington to the big behemoth that it is today. And I think in those environs, in the exalted thin air of the Billionaires Club, people rub each other up the wrong way, and in this case, it was like that. But Wiese shrugged the comments that Rupert made about his finances off, saying, "Look, he's still got his family to be thankful for, and he remains one of the richest men in the country."
Well, Marcus Jooste, still in Stellenbosch?
Look, Marcus, by all accounts, he still leads a very charmed life. He still has access to enormous and vast resources. If we talk about the Stalingrad defense that former President Jacob Zuma has employed over the last 16 years to prevent him from going to jail and from even standing trial on charges of corruption, Jooste can do it 10 times over because he's got so much more money and resources to draw upon. By all accounts, he still leads a very charmed life out in Hermanus, where he has a very big mansion there. He sold his estate outside of Stellenbosch. And there are a lot of rumors and colorful stories about Jooste still being the life of many social events and parties in and around the winelands, the West Coast, and Cape Town. So Jooste's got an army of lawyers defending and protecting him, and they'll do their damnedest to make sure that Jooste can probably live out his days in absolute luxury, unless the National Prosecuting Authority, forensic auditors connected to the Hawks, can step up and unravel this alleged enormous crime.
Pieter du Toit, thanks so much for talking to us about Christo Wiese, the 3 lessons I learned from Steinhoff, which is an excerpt from the updated edition of his book, The Stellenbosch Mafia, Inside the Billionaires Club. Very, very fascinating stuff there, talking about no love lost between South Africa's 2nd and 6th richest men, the Billionaires Club, the 0.01%, how the other half lives. And that's where we're going to leave it. It's time for Headline News with Leanne.